Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Charlie Flannery, and my guest today, back for the third segment of this episode, is attorney Burke Fountain. Burke?
Good to see you again.
Yes. Thank you for all of your hard work on this series. And
You're welcome.
We had in the first two episodes, we had talked about mortgages and the foreclosure process. Mm-hmm. And I've received some emails from viewers. One of the things, surprisingly, was the amount of emails that I received from people who were tenants. And in most cases, these people had a lease effective. They were paying their rent to the landlord when suddenly they find out that
they have a new landlord.
They have a new landlord, and many times these people then get evicted by the bank or whatever. And you know, I've been at many closings over these past 27 years, and every time I saw someone sign the note and mortgage for a multifamily home, there was always a clause in there that said that if the owner or borrower did not pay the bank had the right to step in and collect the rents. Isn't that correct?
You are correct.
So tell me what you can tell these tenants that are facing this situation.
Well, generally speaking, the lease is subject to the mortgage. So, except for a new law, it is possible for the bank that takes over to evict the tenants. And I don't understand the reason, but the big banks were typically doing that. They wanted the buildings empty. They didn't want to be landlords. So you are right. You'd have people paying every month, not doing anything wrong, and yet they'd all be put out in the street. So the building would be empty, and then the bank could sell it to whomever. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts put a law into effect. It's probably 2 years now. That you can't do that anymore. If the tenant is paying, if you take the building, you assume the landlord's hat. You got to treat tenants like tenants.
So they have to honor the lease.
Yes, you inherit them.
Okay, that's the same as if a private sale were taking place.
That's right.
Between a buyer and a seller.
Yes.
If there are leases in effect, I have to respect those. Mm-hmm. Do the banks in effect still initiate eviction proceedings against these tenants, or does that law prohibit them from doing that?
Like every law, it's not black and white. Mm-hmm. Of course, if the owners of the property are living in the building, they're going to get evicted. Mm-hmm. But tenants who are paying, as long as they keep paying and do the things they should do, they have protection for a certain amount of time, and whether or not the bank has a purchase and sale agreement with someone, because if they go to sell it to you and you don't want the tenants there, once the bank signs a purchase and sale agreement with you, they can start eviction proceedings. If the bank legitimately, there are serious problems, health, safety, whatever, where they need the people out to do work on the property. But generally speaking, you're not going to be out in the street in a couple days just because the bank has taken over.
And my understanding is that in practice, some representative from the bank will generally approach the tenants, offer them sometimes a quite generous incentive package to move. Provide them with moving expenses, first, last, and security deposits, and a little money for their time. So as you say,
I don't want to get people's hopes up that
mm-hmm.
Everybody who's a tenant is going to get a big fat check. It depends on the circumstances. Depends how badly the bank wants the people out. All those things that are very individual from case to case.
Do you think that a tenant that finds themselves in that type of a situation, should they seek legal counsel?
Everyone should seek legal counsel. If the bank wants them out and they really, really don't want to get out, then sure, they need an attorney.
Because they do have some rights.
Oh, absolutely. And sure, there's some negotiating to be done, and they probably would make out better if they had an attorney.
Always wise when you have a real problem to go to somebody with real letters after their name.
That's right.
You know? Yeah. So, well, thank you for shedding some light on that. One of the other questions that came up repeatedly was, I'm being faced with the eviction, the foreclosure, and what steps can I take to kind of stall the process or circumvent the process? Does a homestead help out at all? Is bankruptcy the route?
Homestead will not help out. And of course, we're talking the owner of the house. We're not talking tenants anymore. The homestead, in almost every mortgage I see, there's a paragraph in there that you waive your rights of homestead as to the mortgage anyway. So that won't help you. Bankruptcy will slow things down. And many people do file bankruptcy, either to slow it down to keep themselves in the house for a while, or they let the foreclosure happen because they know it's inevitable. And rather than have the bank coming after them for the money that the bank has lost because the house, was a $200,000 mortgage, the house sold for $100,000 and the bank's coming after them for the other $100,000, they go bankrupt and get rid of that debt.
Now, that debt, that's referred to as a deficiency judgment that the bank has to seek.
Yes.
Right? Do they generally pursue that? I know that at one time, if they took it either through short sale or foreclosure, they were owed, say, $300,000 and they only got $200,000, they used to send a 1099 to the homeowner for $100,000. I think that's since stopped. I mean, you say, the poor guy, if he had, the government probably wants $30,000 out of that $100,000. If the guy had $30,000, he probably would have paid his mortgage,
You are correct. I think we need to explain that to people a little bit more.
Please do.
Because that is complicated. And I don't want to give tax advice. But the bank seeking a deficiency judgment means that the bank is going to court and getting a piece of paper that the people still owe $100,000 and they want to chase the people and actually get the money from the people. If the bank has lost $100,000 and they know there's no chance, the people they don't have jobs, they don't have any money, they got nothing. The bank isn't going to waste its time chasing after them. They send them a 1099, which is a piece of paper which goes to the government to report income. And that is considered, under the tax law, income. I've never understood that one, but it's considered income, and you are correct that the government is looking for you. If you've received a notice that they've written off the $100,000, that they're looking for somewhere around $30,000 in taxes on your income.
So is this pretty much standard behavior for what happens at the end game?
Well, it was standard. And because of the financial crisis we're in over the last couple of years, there have been some laws, and like all the laws are complicated, but there are many exceptions now, at least for a short term, as to whether or not there will be any taxes due.
Okay, so does the lender get a deficiency judgment plus send the 1099 out to the government, or?
the deficiency judgment says to me that the bank is actually going to go after the people and try to collect the money.
Uh-huh.
The 1099 tells me that the bank has given up. They know they're not going to get the money.
I see.
So they have written it off.
Okay. So it would not be both, it would be either or.
Right.
If it reaches that stage, does a bankruptcy filing won't protect that person from the debt that the IRS is thinking he has, right?
The IRS is a very special creditor.
They're worse than the mafia.
You said that, I didn't.
But I love them. Yes. Go ahead.
You had mentioned short sales.
Uh-huh.
In passing on this 1099 thing.
Yes.
We ought to talk about short sales,
Okay.
which we didn't. Short sales and deeds in lieu of foreclosure. Because we've talked about foreclosures, and people should know that there are other routes. A deed in lieu is fairly simple. You tell the bank, hey, there's no way I can afford it, let me give you a deed to the property. And you just deed the property to the bank, you give them the keys, and they own the property.
Now, and then all is forgiven. As part of that agreement, they agree that if they lose money...
Well, no, that's negotiable.
Okay.
The bank might say, we understand you're down on your luck today, but we think you'll come back in a few years, and so you're going to sign a new note saying that you're going to give us the rest of the money that you owe in a year, 2 years, 5 years.
Because I see really very few deeds in lieu of foreclosure.
And in order to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, you cannot have a second mortgage. You can't have been sued by a credit card company. In other words, the title to the property has to be clear. You have to have that mortgage to the bank and nothing else. If there's anything else, the bank can't take a deed because the property is encumbered by all these other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is true of a short sale. Now, what a short sale is, people go to a realtor and say, I got to sell this house. I can't make the payments. I've lost my job. I got to get out. And the people owe $200,000 and in the current market, and they haven't had money to maintain the property. It's worth $100,000, and you know it's worth $100,000. You know you can't sell it for $200,000, and yet that's what the bank is owed. So you talk to the bank and say the property's only worth $100,000. If you foreclose, you're only going to get $100,000. Plus, you're going to run up a big legal bill and a lot of expenses, and it's going to take you 6 months or a year. If I can find a buyer at $100,000, will you accept the $100,000 and release the property from the mortgage? Now, it's a separate issue. Is the bank going to forgive the people? Is the bank going to chase them for the money, make them sign a note, or what's going to happen there? But hopefully you can sell the real estate.
So at what point would that person be totally out of the woods? Not having to be looking over their shoulder, be it the IRS, be it the bank. I mean, is there a statute of limitations?
Well, there are statutes of limitations, but they all run a lot longer than the people want them to run.
Really?
Yeah, I wouldn't even attempt to answer that general a question because everything is so individualized. Mm-hmm. Now, the short sale, as I said, the deed in lieu of foreclosure, short sales are a problem if the people have been sued by banks over credit cards and things, and they've got other issues in the title to the property. It can be worked out, and I have many clients who have come to me and they have a second mortgage for $50,000, and I tell that bank, well, if there's a foreclosure, you're getting nothing. And sometimes I can get them to take $5,000 so they get something rather than nothing. Mm-hmm. Bank sues for $5,000 on a credit card, and I get them to take $1,000 rather than the $5,000. So, it's all negotiations and working it out. But a short sale or a deed in lieu of foreclosure, everybody involved, everybody who has a lien has to be on board and agree to the whole big picture.
Yeah, it's a very complex situation many times.
Yep.
Well, We're going to take a brief break for a couple of public service announcements. I want you to hang in there for more of Let's Talk Real Estate.
Some things require experts at every stage.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Others are more just a matter of taste and preference.
Just the way I like them.
Buying a home falls somewhere in between. That's why you should visit HomeLoanLearningCenter.com for expert guidance. A website where you can learn just how you should go about buying a home. You'll get facts, tools, and impartial advice. From seeing a lender to settlement and beyond, there's a step-by-step explanation of the process. All at HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
Houston, we have a solution.
Think of it as mission control for buying a home. That's HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
This is a message from HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Can you afford your home loan? Could your mortgage payment increase in a few months to something you can't afford? Hi, I'm Ruby D. If you're not sure you can continue to make your mortgage payments, call a government-approved housing counselor in your community for free and confidential help. Keep your home. Know your loan. Call today.
Call 877-HUD-1515. That's 877-HUD-1515 or go to HUD.gov.
Hi, welcome back to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Charlie Flannery, and my guest today is still attorney Burke Fountain. Burke, thanks for not running out on me at the break. And we had touched briefly on bankruptcy before the break, and there's so much meat and potatoes in that topic. Can you expand on that, talk about how it might impact different phases of the foreclosure process and how it could afford an avenue of help for some people?
Okay. The bankruptcy law has many chapters, as they call them, and some of them have to do with businesses, and there's a special chapter for railroads and so on. But there are two chapters that have to do with regular people, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Chapter 7 is total liquidation. The people write off all their debts and walk away with what the statute allows them to keep. Chapter 13 is a reorganization, a plan to work out your debts. On a 13, you have to have a job and have income and be able to put a plan forward with the court where you might not be able to pay the $2,000 a month you have in debts now, but you can pay $1,000, so you work something out with all the creditors and you actually make a payment to the bankruptcy court and they write the checks out to all of the creditors. And usually that plan is for 5 years.
5, okay.
And you know, it's based on your income and what you can afford to pay and what creditors are willing to accept. Some people file Chapter 13s and then they put forth a plan which is the court finds unrealistic and throws it out. Chapter 7, again, is total liquidation. You've lost your job, the bank is foreclosed on the house, you got nothing. You file Chapter 7 and the court just writes off all of your debts. Now, with a house, if you file any type of bankruptcy a few days before the foreclosure, the bank, all of your creditors, are automatically stopped from harassing you, from filing an action with the court, foreclosing, calling you on the telephone. Cannot do anything without permission of the bankruptcy court.
And this is with both Chapters 13 and 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The Chapter 13, of course, again, there's a plan and people have to look at figures. On the Chapter 7, people are admitting that there's no money. But let's say it's a Chapter 7 and the papers the people have filed make it clear they don't have any money. There's absolutely no way they can pay this mortgage. The bank is still stopped from foreclosing until they get permission from the court. And the bank's attorney can file for relief from the stay. They go in and say, look, these people, the papers they filed make it clear they've got no money, no jobs, there's no way they can pay this loan. The property is worth $100,000, they owe $200,000, and the court can say, you're right, there's no hope on this, and gives permission to go ahead with the foreclosure.
Uh-huh.
But it gives the people a little time.
A little bit of time.
A little bit of time.
At that point, I know we had talked previously, like that there was a period of almost 8 months or so, 9 months before it got to the bank taking it back, and then quite often they would hold it for a period of 6 to 8 months before they began the actual foreclosure. I mean, you know, actually took title.
Oh yeah, it's a year.
And is there any way that, I mean, other than you said negotiating, to make sure that there's no deficiency judgment sent out? Is that something that's discretionary on the part of the lender?
I think it is. I think it's up to the lender to decide.
Because they really didn't lose 100, because in our earlier conversation, if they let it go to the worst case scenario, Fannie or Freddie or we the people reimburse them that $100,000 that they've lost. So there's really no loss unless Fannie or Freddie wants to send that person a 1099. Isn't that how it really should work?
I suppose that's how it really should work.
In an ideal world?
In an ideal world.
And what are the chances that Fannie or Freddie would even ever do that? I mean, they're worried about your little $100,000. They're hemorrhaging billions.
They are.
It's too hypothetical.
Yeah, it's really too hypothetical. They go after the deficiency if they want, and I don't see any rhyme or reason. And sometimes they let people walk away without that deficiency or the 1099 or anything, and other times they're adamant that they want them. I don't know what goes on in their heads.
You know, I want to save time for us to talk about, if you have any ideas about solutions to this pile of doo-doo that we have on our hands. But we can still continue on talking on about bankruptcy. We have a bit of time, but.
Bankruptcy. I don't know how much else to say. You know, again, I don't want to. You get into every case is specific, and once you get past the generals, it's. I don't want to mislead people because what works for this person isn't what's going to work for that person.
I haven't heard of a lot of people really complaining or saying that they got a 1099 from any lender. I don't know if that's just, I mean, that's strictly anecdotal. But it doesn't seem to be happening. I thought that some legislation had been passed somewhere on a federal level.
Yes, there has. A few years ago, people were always getting 1099s, and they're not now. And it's part of the, you know, emergency legislation for bailing the banks out, and it was part of it. Some relief for people who owe money too.
Was there an expiration date to that piece of legislation?
I think there is.
Yeah.
And I think it's 2014. But I'm not sure of that. I'm not that up on my tax law.
All right. But so that problem of someone being indebted to the IRS really isn't happening on a daily basis today. I mean, but in the
I would not want to say to a person, feel free to get foreclosed or to do a short sale, and you won't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Individual cases.
Yeah, they probably would need not only legal counsel, but the advice of a good tax accountant, CPA, something like that, to negotiate the whole package.
Right.
So we get this mess. I was just looking, just in Taunton, there are 180 single-family homes on the market.
Mm-hmm.
In the past 30 days, 20 have sold. That means we have a 9-month supply of inventory if nothing new comes on.
Mm-hmm.
That's not too good. A good, healthy supply is 3 to 5 months. So we're like at least double what a healthy market should be.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see on the horizon? And do you have any suggestions how, if you were speaking to the people in Washington, the power brokers,
Well, yeah, every law, I don't care if it's at the state level or the federal level, there's an upside and there's a downside. And we had a problem with the lenders giving anybody a loan, no matter how unqualified they were. So the government steps in and says, lenders, you really screwed up. Here are the new rules that are going to be really tight. So this will never happen again. But of course the problem is that you have all these houses sitting out there and people trying to sell them, and now nobody qualifies to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who a couple of years ago could get a loan, they can't get a loan.
We need to bring back the LIA loan and stimulate the economy.
Well, that would help, huh? There happens to be a happy medium. And with politicians, there's never a happy medium. They come up with an emergency and they rush something through that, And the same thing with, at the state level, the law where a bank has to give a 30-day notice to foreclose, and then it's a 90-day notice, and now it's a 150-day notice. Realistically, the people are $10,000 behind in payments before the bank started, and now they're $30,000 behind. There's no chance of straightening out. And then the cases where the people have abandoned the house, or it's a multifamily and they never lived there, and you have houses sitting empty with nobody caring about them. And again, politicians, they make things good, they make things worse sometimes.
Well, I couldn't agree with that last statement any more than I do. Sometimes the cure is as bad as the problem itself. Listen, I'd really like to thank you for being a part of Let's Talk Real Estate for this series on mortgages and foreclosures. If you'd like a copy of today's episode or any copies of the 3, please send an email to letstalkrealestate@verizon.net. If you have any further questions that you'd like me to address to Attorney Fountain, you can also send them in to letstalkrealestate@verizon.net. And you can also call 508-884-8869. Be happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks a lot for being a part of Let's Talk Real Estate, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe.